facts before us are clear. President Trump did not merely seek to benefit from foreign interference in our elections. He directly and explicitly invited foreign interference in our election.
America will see why most people don't go to law school. No offense to our professors. But please, really, we're bringing you in here today to testify on stuff that most of you have already written about, all four, for the opinions that we already know, out of the classrooms that maybe you're getting ready for finals in, to discuss things that you probably haven't even had a chance to say. Unless you're really good on TV or watching the hearings for the last couple of weeks, you couldn't have possibly actually digested the Adam Schiff report from yesterday or the Republican response in any real way.
Okay, so here's something wild that nobody's really talking about. Trump just stood up in front of House Republicans at their own party retreat and basically admitted he's terrified of getting impeached. Like, he didn't dance around it, he didn't sugarcoat it. He straight up told them, if you guys lose the midterms, I'm done. They'll impeach me. And honestly, the fact that he said the quiet part out loud should tell you everything you need to know about where his head's at right now. This is the same guy who spent years acting like he's bulletproof, like nothing could ever touch him. But now he's standing in front of his own party, the people who are supposed to be his strongest allies, and he's basically begging them to save him because he knows what's coming if they don't.
Will a slipshod impeachment make us less mad? Will it only invite an invitation for the madness to follow every future administration? That is why this is wrong.
There are some additional high crimes and misdemeanors that are specifically identified in the text of the Constitution, correct?
Yes, that's true.
What are they?
Treason and bribery.
Do President Trump's demands on Ukraine also establish the high crime of bribery?
So this happened on January 6th, 2026. Trump sitting there with his Republican allies, the people who are supposed to have his back. And instead of pumping them up or talking about his big wins, he's basically begging them. You have to win the midterms, he says, because if we don't, they'll find a reason to impeach me. I'll be impeached. Those were his actual words. Can you believe this? The guy who spent years acting like he's untouchable, like nothing can bring him down, is now admitting that his entire presidency depends on Republicans keeping control of Congress. And here's the thing, he's not wrong. Because while Trump's out there warning his own party about what's coming, Democrats and a whole coalition of advocacy groups are already building the case to end his term early. We're not talking about some random Twitter hashtag or angry protest signs. We're talking about actual impeachment resolutions filed in Congress with specific articles laying out exactly why they think Trump needs to go. We're talking about mass petition drives with tens of thousands of signatures. We're talking about organized campaigns with real groups, real lawyers, real activists, all pushing the same message: impeach Trump again, and this time actually remove him from office. And the craziest part, they've got a pretty solid list of reasons. I'm talking 7 different articles of impeachment, everything from tyranny and corruption to usurping Congress's power over war and money. Like, these aren't vague accusations. They're pointing to specific actions, specific decisions, specific moments where Trump allegedly crossed the line. And now all of this is sitting there waiting like a loaded gun, ready to go off the second Democrats get the votes they need. So what we're watching right now is this insane high-stakes game of political chicken. On one side, you've got Trump telling Republicans that losing the House means he's getting impeached. On the other side, you've got Democrats and these removal coalitions basically saying, yeah, that's exactly what we're planning. And in the middle, the 2026 midterm elections, which just became a literal referendum on whether Trump even finishes his second term. This isn't about policy anymore. This isn't about left versus right. This is about whether the sitting president gets to serve out his full 4 years, or whether Congress is going to pull the plug early. And honestly, I don't think people fully understand how real this is. All right, so let's talk about what's actually happening here. Because when most people hear impeachment, they think it's just noise. They think it's just Democrats complaining. But this time, it's way more organized than that, like way more serious. And if you actually look at what's been filed and who's pushing it, you start to realize this isn't just some long-shot fantasy. This is a coordinated effort with real momentum behind it. We're talking multiple fronts, multiple organizations, multiple strategies, all converging at the same time. And the timeline, it's all pointing toward the same moment, the 2026 midterm elections. That's when everything either falls apart for Trump or when he dodges the biggest bullet of his political career. First, let's talk about the actual impeachment resolution that's already sitting in Congress. It's called H-Res 353, and it was introduced way back in April of 2025. So this has been cooking for months, and it lays out count them, 7 different articles of impeachment against Trump. We're talking tyranny, bribery, and corruption, usuring Congress's power over appropriations, usuring Congress's power to declare war. Like, these are constitutional level accusations. They're saying Trump has fundamentally broken the separation of powers, that he's acting like a king instead of a president, and that he's using his office to enrich himself and punish his enemies. And here's the thing, they didn't just throw random charges at the wall. Each article points to specific actions and specific patterns of behavior. This isn't some rushed job. This is a carefully constructed legal argument designed to survive scrutiny. For example, one of the big ones is about war powers. Critics are pointing to stuff like military strikes, threats against other countries, using ICE and military forces in ways that Congress never authorized. They're saying Trump is making decisions that are supposed to require congressional approval, and he's just doing it anyway. Then there's the money stuff. They're accusing him of corruption, of using his position to benefit his businesses, of ignoring emoluments clauses, all that constitutional stuff about presidents not being allowed to profit from their office. And then on top of all that, they're hitting him on attacks against the press, attacks against judges, basically saying he's undermining the very foundations of democracy. Each one of these charges on its own would be serious, but all 7 together, that's building towards something massive. That's building toward a comprehensive case that Trump has systematically abused the powers of his office. Now you might be thinking, okay, but one resolution doesn't mean anything if it just sits there gathering dust. And you're right, but here's where it gets interesting. Because this isn't just one resolution sitting in a drawer somewhere. There's an entire movement building around it, like an actual organized coalition of groups all working together, all pushing the same goal. Get Trump out of office before his term ends. There's this campaign called Impeach Trump Again, and yeah, the name is pretty on the nose. But what they're doing is basically building a national pressure campaign, urging Congress to impeach and remove Trump for what they call a growing list of impeachable offenses. They're arguing that unless Congress acts, Trump is just going to keep entrenching corruption, keep usurping powers that belong to other branches, keep pushing the boundaries of what a president can get away with. And their whole pitch is, look, we impeached him twice before, but we didn't actually remove him. This time, we need to finish the job. This time, we need to actually follow through and make it stick. And they're not alone. There's something called the Removal Coalition, which is this alliance of different advocacy groups: Citizens Impeachment, Free Speech for People, Women's March. All these organizations that have been fighting Trump for years. And they're not just calling for impeachment, they're calling for removal, like actually kicking him out of office. And they're going hard, accusing Trump of tyranny. Some of them even throwing around the word treason, saying he's using military and ICE forces against Americans, saying he's acting like a dictator instead of a democratically elected leader. These aren't fringe groups either. These are established organizations with legal teams, with funding, with grassroots networks across the country. They've been doing this work for years, and now they're all coordinating their efforts around the same objective. Then, on top of all this formal political organizing, you've got grassroots petition drives. There's one called Blackout the System, and it's already got close to 100,000 signatures. 98,000 people, as of mid-January 2026, have signed a petition calling for Trump's impeachment over greed, corruption, and lack of accountability. And these aren't just random internet trolls. These are real people putting their names on a list, saying they want Congress to act. Like, when you get that many signatures that fast, it tells you there's real energy behind this. It tells you that people are paying attention and they're demanding action. And in an election year, that energy matters, that pressure matters, because it forces Democratic lawmakers to either act on it or explain to their base why they're not. So you've got the formal impeachment resolutions, you've got the organized advocacy coalitions, you've got the mass petition campaigns, and now here's the kicker. You've got Trump himself confirming that all of this is a real threat. Because remember, at that January 6th House Republican retreat, he didn't say, oh, Democrats might try to impeach me, but it'll never work. He said, if we lose the midterms, I will be impeached. Like, he's treating it as a done deal. He's basically admitting that the only thing standing between him and removal from office is Republican control of Congress. And when a sitting president is that openly worried about impeachment, when he's making it the centerpiece of his pitch to his own party, that tells you everything you need to know about how serious this threat actually is. And that brings us to the 2026 midterms, which are now the most important elections in recent memory. Because think about what's at stake here. If Republicans keep the House, Trump gets to serve out his term. If Democrats take the House, all of these impeachment efforts, all of these removal campaigns, all of this pressure, it all becomes real. This is unfortunately like Democrats would actually have the votes to impeach him in the House. Now, they'd still need a 2/3 majority in the Senate to actually remove him, and that's a way higher bar. But even just getting impeached again, even just having that vote happen, it would be absolutely massive. It would dominate the news cycle. It would define his entire second term. And it would give Democrats a platform to air every single grievance they have against him. Every scandal, every abuse, every questionable decision, all of it becomes fair game in an impeachment inquiry. And here's the thing. The polling right now, it's not looking great for Republicans. The generic ballot, which is basically asking voters whether they'd rather vote for a Democrat or a Republican for Congress, has Democrats up by about 4 points. 46.6% for Democrats, 42.2% for Republicans. Now that can change. We're still months away from the actual election. But if those numbers hold, Democrats are in a really strong position to take back the House. And if that happens, Trump's prediction that he'll be impeached stops being a warning and starts being a reality. So what we're watching right now is this slow-mo collision between Trump's presidency and the biggest political threat he's faced since his last impeachment. But this time feels different, because this time it's not just Democrats being outraged. It's organized, it's strategic, it's building momentum across multiple fronts. And most importantly, Trump himself is acting like he knows it's real. He's not brushing it off, he's not laughing about it. He's warning his own party that if they don't deliver for him in the midterms, his presidency is over. And when the guy at the center of all this is the one sounding the alarm, yeah, you should probably pay attention. Okay, so let's break this down into what it actually means. Because I know some of you are probably thinking, all right, this sounds dramatic, but is this really going to happen? And honestly, that's the right question to ask. Because yeah, there's a lot of talk about impeachment. There's a lot of organizing. There's a lot of pressure building. But actually removing a sitting president, that's incredibly hard. Like historically hard. It's only happened, never. No president has ever been removed from office through impeachment. Nixon resigned before it could happen. Andrew Johnson and Bill Clinton were impeached but not removed. And Trump himself was impeached twice, and both times the Senate acquitted him. So we've got a track record here that suggests that even if impeachment happens, removal probably won't. But that doesn't mean this whole thing doesn't matter, because even the process itself can be devastating. So the question is, what makes this time any different? And the answer is a few things. First, Trump himself is treating this as a real threat. And that matters because when a president starts openly worrying about impeachment, when he's telling his own party that his survival depends on them winning elections, that tells you he sees something on the horizon that scares him. Trump's not the kind of guy who admits weakness easily. So the fact that he's out here saying, yeah, if Republicans lose, I'm getting impeached, that's significant. That's not spin, that's not posturing, that's genuine concern. And if Trump's worried, there's probably a good reason for it. He's got better intel than we do. He knows what conversations are happening behind closed doors. He knows which Republicans might be wavering. He knows how serious this threat actually is. Second, the infrastructure is already in place. The impeachment resolutions are filed. The advocacy groups are organized. The petition drives are collecting signatures. The legal arguments are laid out. Like, this isn't starting from scratch. If Democrats take the House in November 2026, they don't need to spend months building a case. They can move on this almost immediately. And that speed, that readiness, that's something we haven't really seen before. Usually these things take time to develop, but this has been building for over a year. The groundwork is already done. All that's missing is the political will. And that comes the moment Democrats get control of the House Judiciary Committee. Third, and this is important, the specific accusations against Trump are serious enough that they could actually move the needle with some Republicans. Like, if you're talking about usurping war powers, That's a constitutional issue that some conservative lawmakers actually care about. Congress is supposed to have the power to declare war. If Trump is launching military strikes without congressional authorization, that pisses off the constitutional originalists, even on the right. Same thing with appropriations. Congress controls the purse strings. If Trump is spending money without congressional approval, that's a separation of powers issue that transcends party lines. Now, would enough Republicans actually vote to convict him in the Senate? Probably not. But the fact that there are constitutional arguments that could appeal to conservatives that makes this a little less of a pure partisan fight and a little more of a real constitutional crisis. And constitutional crises are unpredictable. Things can shift fast when the fundamental structure of government is at stake. Fourth, the timing matters. Trump is in his second term. He can't run again, so Republicans don't need to worry about protecting him for future elections. Like, if you're a Republican senator and you're thinking about 2028, your calculation changes. You're not protecting the party's standard bearer for the next election cycle. You're protecting a guy who's already termed out, who's causing you political headaches, and who might be dragging down the whole party with him. That changes the political math. It doesn't guarantee they'll turn on him, but it makes it at least possible. And in a Senate trial, you only need a handful of Republicans to break ranks to make things very uncomfortable for Trump, even if he ultimately survives. Now, let's talk about what happens if Democrats do take the House and move forward with impeachment. The process would go something like this. First, the House Judiciary Committee would hold hearings. They bring in witnesses. They'd review evidence. They'd debate the articles of impeachment. Then, if the committee votes to advance the articles, it goes to the full House for a vote. And if a simple majority of the House votes yes, Trump is impeached again for the third time. That would be historic. No president has ever been impeached 3 times. And just that fact alone would be devastating for his legacy. It would cement him as the most investigated, most scrutinized, most legally embattled president in American history. But impeachment is only step 1. To actually remove Trump from office, you need a Senate trial, and you need 2/3 of the Senate to vote to convict. That's 67 senators. Right now, Democrats would need basically every Democrat plus a bunch of Republicans to get there. And yeah, that's a huge lift. It's probably not going to happen. But here's the thing. Even if Trump doesn't get convicted, even if he stays in office, the impeachment process itself would be absolutely brutal, because it would give Democrats a platform to investigate every scandal, every allegation, every shady deal, every abuse of power. It would dominate the news for months. It would paralyze Trump's agenda. It would define his entire second term. And it would make him a lame duck president, unable to accomplish anything, just fighting to survive until his term ends. Every hearing would be televised. Every witness would be cross-examined. Every document would be scrutinized. It would be a months-long spectacle that consumes everything. And that's what makes Trump's warning to House Republicans so telling. Because even if impeachment doesn't result in removal, even if it's just political theater, it's still devastating. It still wrecks his presidency. It still makes him look weak and embattled and cornered. And Trump, more than anything, cares about looking strong. He cares about looking like a winner. He cares about controlling the narrative. And an impeachment process, even if it fails, strips all of that away. It puts him on defense. It makes him look desperate. It makes him look like he's losing. And for a guy whose entire brand is built on winning, that's almost worse than actual removal. So when you add it all up, what you're looking at is a genuine constitutional showdown with the 2026 midterms as the trigger. If Republicans hold the House, Trump probably skates. He finishes his term. The impeachment resolutions sit there unused. The advocacy campaigns lose steam, and Trump gets to spend his final 2 years doing whatever he wants without worrying about Congress checking him. But if Democrats take the House, all bets are off. Impeachment becomes real. The investigations start. The hearings begin. And Trump spends the rest of his presidency fighting for survival. Every day becomes about defending himself instead of advancing his agenda. And honestly, the fact that we're even talking about this, the fact that a sitting president is openly warning his own party that he'll be impeached if they lose elections, that tells you everything you need to know about where we are right now. This isn't normal. This isn't just partisan bickering. This is a president who knows he's vulnerable, who knows the threats against him are real, and who's basically admitted that his entire future depends on one election. So what comes next? Well, buckle up, because the next 10 months are going to be wild. Every vote in Congress matters. Every poll matters. Every scandal, every controversy, every new accusation. It all feeds into this larger narrative about whether Trump finishes his term or whether Democrats end it early. And Trump, for his part, is going to do everything he can to keep Republicans in line, to keep them scared of losing, to keep them focused on protecting him, because he knows better than anyone that if Democrats take the House, his presidency is effectively over, whether he gets removed or not. And that, right there, is why this story matters. Because it's not just about impeachment, it's not just about political drama. It's about whether the voters in November 2026 decide that Trump's second term gets to continue, or whether they pull the plug and let Democrats spend the next 2 years putting on trial. And either way, that's a pretty big deal. All right, that's it for today. If you want to stay on top of this story, subscribe, hit the bell, and join the newsletter down below, because trust me, this is just getting started. We'll see you in the next one.